Amanda worked as a real estate agent when we got married. Good excuse to have many clients. Good excuse to leave at any hour. Good excuse for the phone to never be quiet. I heard client and thought, client. Until the night the second phone fell from her bag in the restaurant bathroom. My name is Michael Carter, 47 years old, senior civil engineer and founding partner of a structural consulting firm in Chicago. We were at a dinner celebrating 2 years of marriage when it happened. She went to the bathroom. Her bag was hanging on the chair. We heard a thump. The waiter brought over a phone that had fallen. It wasn't the phone I knew. It was black. The other one was white. She came back from the bathroom, saw the phone in my hand, and her face did something I will never forget. Not surprise, calculation. That half-second of calculation from someone deciding what to say. That's my work phone. You have a work phone? Since when? A few months. The agency gave them to all the agents. I picked up the phone, looked at her. Can I open it? Another half-second of calculation. Sure. I opened it. On the home screen there were 201 unread conversations, all organized in a folder called Clients. I opened the first contact. They weren't clients. They were 201 conversations with men, each one at a level of intimacy that left no room for interpretation. I stared at the screen for about 40 seconds. Then I put the phone on the table. Michael. No. I called the waiter, paid the bill, stood up. Get a car home, I need air. I walked out of the restaurant. I walked for 40 minutes through Lincoln Park without direction. It wasn't anger yet. It was that stage before anger where your brain tries to process the gap between what you thought was real and what just appeared on the screen. 2 years of marriage, 486 days since we signed the papers, and 201 open conversations in a folder she called Clients. At 11 p.m. I sat on a park bench and texted James. James, do you have Patricia Chen's number? Pause. I do. Something happen? Yes. Send it now. He sent it. I didn't call Patricia that night, but I saved the number. And while walking home, I made decisions in the silence of that walk. First, no more confrontation that night. Any conversation now would be emotional. Emotional wasn't what I needed. Second, tomorrow morning, before anything else, I'd call Patricia. Third, I'd use the days between now and any formal protocol to understand exactly what was mine and what needed protection. I got home. Amanda was awake on the couch. Michael, I need to explain. Not tonight. I need to sleep. I went to the bedroom. I slept 6 hours. Do you know exactly what to protect if something like this landed on your doorstep tomorrow? Financial planning for retirees was created so that when the phone falls, you already know what to do. Before it falls. Like and subscribe if this story connected with you. More stories coming. See you in the next episode. The next morning at 8, I called Patricia. I told her in 15 minutes. Objective version. She listened without interrupting. Michael, 2 years of marriage, no prenuptial agreement? No. Do you have assets from before the marriage? The firm, 2 properties, some of the retirement account. Acquired during? The Oak Park house we bought together, her car that I paid for, some investments. We need to meet this week, before any move. Thursday morning? Thursday at 8. The conversation with Amanda happened Wednesday evening because she approached me in the kitchen and said she couldn't take the silence anymore. Michael, I need to explain. You can explain. She sat down. It wasn't what it looked like. What was it? Silence. They were contacts, people I knew. Some had other intentions. 201 people with other intentions. She closed her eyes. Not all of them were like that. How many were? Longer silence. I don't know. You don't know. Michael, Amanda, I'm not here to hear a version. I'm here to tell you that Patricia Chen will be contacting your attorney. All communication about the legal process goes through her. She looked at me. You already have an attorney. I do. Since when? Since yesterday morning. She was quiet for about 10 seconds. That was fast. I was methodical. I stood up. "If you need anything from the house, let me know and I'll step out." I went to the bedroom. The process lasted 4 months. Amanda's attorney tried 4 approaches. First, the Oak Park house was jointly acquired and should be divided 50-50. Patricia presented statements showing the down payment had been paid exclusively from my individual account, with funds from a sale before the marriage. Second, the car I had paid for was joint marital property. Patricia presented that the car was titled in Amanda's name, and I had funded the purchase as a documented personal contribution. Third, my firm partnership had grown during the marriage. Patricia presented the premarital contributions and original partnership agreement predating the marriage. Fourth, quick settlement at below equitable value. I didn't accept. Final agreement in week 17. Oak Park house, 58% to me. Car, proportional market value restituted in installments. Firm, entirely mine. Legal fees, Amanda's responsibility. Weeks after the agreement, I went back to the same restaurant where the anniversary dinner had happened. Not for nostalgia, for closure. Sat at the same table, ordered the same dish, ate alone. When I finished, I looked at the chair where her bag had hung, paid the check, left. There's a detail about that anniversary dinner I haven't told. When the waiter brought the phone over and I held it in my hand, Amanda hadn't come back to the table yet. There were about 10 seconds where I was alone with the phone and the decision to open it or not. The screen lit up when it touched the table, and the clients folder was visible with the number 201. I didn't need to open it. The number already told me what I needed to know. What came after was just confirmation. And confirmation, in that context, gave me the clear starting point for everything that followed. No ambiguity, no gray zone, no possibility of convincing myself I was misreading the situation. Sometimes clarity arrives in the most unexpected form. A black phone on a restaurant chair at a 2-year anniversary dinner. 2 years, 486 days, and 201 reasons to start over. And I, in that moment, learned that starting over isn't weakness. It's just the name we give to continuing. James asked me months later if I ever tried to understand the why. Did you ever ask her why 201? I thought about it. And? I realized the answer wouldn't change anything practically, and emotionally the only answer that would matter would be one she could never fully give me. What answer? The one I'd actually need, understanding how someone sustains a structure like that for 2 years inside one house. Not the logistics, the psychology. You don't understand it? Not from the inside perspective. I understand it's possible. I don't understand what it's like to live that way. James was quiet for a moment. You're very pragmatic. I learned that pragmatism isn't the absence of feeling. It's the choice not to let feeling construct stories about things you don't have enough information to understand. Amanda left the house 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner. No scene, no drama. 2 adults dividing spaces with the sobriety of people who know the situation is already decided, and that drama adds nothing to the outcome. The day she left, I was at work. When I got home that evening, there was a note on the kitchen table. Michael, take care. 2 words. I stared at it for about 30 seconds, then threw it away. Not out of anger, because it was the possible close of that phase, and I needed it to be a close, not a symbol that stays in a drawer as a relic of something that doesn't need to be a relic. Michael Carter, 20 years, diagnosing what isn't visible. Sometimes in structures, sometimes in life. The method is the same. Take care. See you in the next episode. There's something about the organization of the folder that stays with me. Not what each conversation contained. I process that. What stays is the organization itself. A folder called Clients. Meticulous categorization, clean structure. No messages outside the folder, no confusion, no naming slip. Amanda was organized. I had always admired that about her. The same organization I admired was what had built all of that for months without me noticing. I learned that efficiency is neutral. It can be applied to anything. And what you admire in someone can be exactly what makes the damage deeper when the objective changes. Patricia asked me at the end of the process what I had done differently from other clients who arrive unprepared. Most clients arrive in crisis. You arrived prepared. What was different? I thought for a moment. I learned through work that the problem you ignore when you can still act is always more expensive than the problem you address at the right time. When I had that phone in my hand, I had two options: react immediately with emotion, or use the available time to prepare. And you chose to prepare. I chose the 3 days I had before she knew I knew. I used them to document, understand, position myself. And that made the difference. That was the entire difference. I paid her fees the following week. It was the best money spent in the entire process. Not for the documents she produced, for the clarity she helped me organize in the moments when I needed clarity more than anything else. Months later, during a routine work moment, I was reading a report about a company that had created a parallel revenue structure to hide debt. I remembered Amanda's folder. Clients. Same principle. A parallel structure created with nomenclature that appeared legitimate, organized not to raise suspicion, maintained with discipline to be sustainable long-term. Company or person, the concealment mechanism works the same way. And so does the diagnosis. You don't find it through random inspection. You find it when something falls from its expected place. A black phone in a bag hanging on a restaurant chair. The data point that reveals the parallel structure rarely arrives by the path you were looking for. It arrives by accident. What isn't accidental is what you do in the hours that follow. Before I close, the question that matters more than any detail in this story. The phone was in my hand for 40 seconds. What I did in the 12 hours that followed was what protected what I had built. Not the luck of finding the phone. The choice to use the time that finding gave me in the right way. Would you do the same? Would you know who to call? What to ask for? How to document before any formal process began? Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. 201 contacts in a folder called Clients. 3 days of preparation. 4 months of process. And what was mine stayed mine. Take care. See you in the next episode. There's something I want to say about those 3 days between the anniversary dinner and the kitchen conversation. Because those 3 days were what saved the financial situation. And they weren't easy. Amanda and I continued in the same house. She in the bedroom, me in the converted home office. We ate separately. We passed each other in the kitchen in the morning with that specific silence of two people who know something has broken and haven't yet decided what to do with the pieces. On the first day I went to work, had 3 meetings, delivered a report I had promised. On the second day I organized the documentation I'd need for the meeting with Patricia. Firm contribution history. Statements from the pre-marriage property sale that had funded the house down payment. Tax returns from the past 3 years showing the income ratio. Investment history with opening dates and fund origins. It wasn't easy to pull that together while the other part of my brain was processing those 201 conversations. But necessity creates discipline where willpower fails. On the third day, Patricia saw the documentation and said something I held on to. Michael, most people arrive here with nothing. You arrived with everything. That's not luck, that's a choice. It's methodology. That's what I meant. James asked once why I had chosen a coffee shop for my conversation with Amanda rather than at home. Why neutral territory? No emotional associations, no memories, a place where both of us could be adults without the baggage that home carries with it. You think about things like that? When you've spent 20 years in structural consulting, you learn that environment influences the outcome of a conversation. Every element that reduces unnecessary emotionality increases the chances of a reasonable result. Logic in every detail. Respect for the process. I paid the coffee, went back to work. 201 contacts in a folder called Clients. 3 days of preparation, 4 months of process. And what was mine stayed mine. Michael Carter, still in Chicago, still building. See you in the next episode. There's one more thing I want to say before closing. Preparation isn't cynicism toward the person you love. It's respect for what you've built. Respect for the years of work, the right decisions, the sacrifices made. Respect for the life you built with your own hands. You can fully trust someone and still have your documents in order. These two things don't contradict each other. They're both expressions of maturity. What you can't do is wait for trust to be violated before thinking about protection. By that point, the time for preparation has already passed. The right moment is always before. Always. I, in that moment, learned that starting over isn't weakness. It's just the name we give to continuing. Take care, Michael Carter. There's something I want to say about those 3 days between the anniversary dinner and the kitchen conversation. Because those 3 days were what saved the financial situation. And they weren't easy. Amanda and I continued in the same house. The first day I went to work normally. The second day I organized the documentation I'd need for the meeting with Patricia. The third day, Patricia looked at the documents. Michael, most people arrive here with nothing. You arrived with everything. That's not luck. That's a choice. It's methodology. That's what I meant. The preparation doesn't eliminate the pain. It doesn't accelerate emotional processing. What it does is separate emotional processing from decision-making. When you're in the worst emotional moment of your life, trying to simultaneously decide what to do about the house, you make emotion-driven decisions you'll regret a year later. I separated the two things. Emotion had its space. The late-night walks, the silence of the desk at 6 in the morning. Decisions happened with Patricia, with documents on the table, with a clear head. The result was what it was. Not because I'm special, because I understood that those two things shouldn't happen simultaneously. That's all I did differently. That's the whole secret. James asked why I had chosen a coffee shop for my conversation with Amanda, rather than at home or somewhere with memories. Why neutral territory? No emotional associations, no memories, a place where both of us can be adults without the baggage that home carries. You think about things like that? When you've spent 20 years in structural engineering and construction, you learn that environment influences the outcome of a conversation. Every element that reduces unnecessary emotionality increases the chances of a reasonable result. Logic in every detail. Respect for the process. I paid the coffee, went back to work. Amanda left the house 3 weeks after the dinner. No scene, no drama. The day she left, I was at work. When I came home that evening, there was a note on the kitchen table. Michael, take care. 2 words. I looked at it for about 30 seconds, then threw it away. Not out of anger, because it was the possible closing of that phase. Months later, during an ordinary work moment, I was reading a report on a company that had created a parallel revenue structure to hide liabilities. I thought of Amanda's folder. Clients. Same principle. A parallel structure created with nomenclature that appeared legitimate, organized not to raise suspicion. Company or person, the concealment mechanism works the same way. The data point that reveals the parallel structure rarely arrives by the path you were looking for. It arrives by accident. What isn't accidental is what you do in the hours that follow. Michael Carter. 20 years diagnosing what isn't visible. Sometimes in structures, sometimes in life. The method is the same. 201 reasons to move forward. And I did. There's one more detail about that anniversary dinner I haven't shared. When the waiter brought the phone and I held it in my hand, Amanda hadn't returned to the table yet. There were about 10 seconds where I was alone with the phone and the decision of whether to open it or not. The screen lit up when it touched the table, and the clients folder was visible with the number 201. I didn't need to open it. The number already told me what I needed to know. What came after was just confirmation. 201 contacts in a folder called Clients. 3 days of preparation, 4 months of process, and what was mine stayed mine.